All right, welcome to Crisis in Perception. This is where we dig into the systems that shape our world. Today, we're going to use Naomi Klein's work as a kind of guide, a map, really, to understand the structure, the incentives, and the real-world outcomes of the system that's driving climate damage. So let's start our story at the Great Barrier Reef. Just look at this. On the left, you've got this incredible, thriving ecosystem, just bursting with life and color. But on the right, well, that's what Naomi Klein saw, a desolate, bone-white graveyard. It's such a stark contrast, and it's a perfect visual for what a system in crisis actually looks like. And what makes this so poignant is that Klein was there with her 4-year-old son. She was showing him this incredible underwater world for the first time. Can you imagine that? It really gets to the emotional heart of this whole crisis. That feeling of watching a natural wonder just vanish right at the moment the next generation is supposed to be falling in love with it. So what caused all this devastation? You might think it was something huge, but it was a seemingly tiny increase in ocean temperature. Just 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. That's it. That tiny change was enough to push this massive, ancient ecosystem right to the brink of collapse. It's a pretty stark reminder of just how fragile our planet really is. Okay, so the dying reef, that's a symptom, right? To really get to the root cause, we have to look deeper. We have to examine the system that's producing these outcomes. Klein really pushes us to see this not as just a bunch of isolated mistakes, but as a machine with a very specific driving purpose. And that system has a name, extractivism. At its core, it's a worldview. It's a way of seeing the Earth not as a living system to be respected, but as a pile of resources to be controlled and exploited for profit. The Earth isn't a partner in this view. It's a machine to be driven, or as Klein puts it, like a bottomless vending machine that we can just take from endlessly. And this brings us to the central metaphor for this whole explainer. I want you to think of this system as a leaking machine. It's designed to do one thing incredibly well: churn out short-term profit. But like any machine, it has byproducts, waste, and it wasn't built to contain that waste. So all that stuff, pollution, social harm, you name it, it just leaks out, getting dumped onto communities and kicked down the road for the future to deal with. Now, a machine like this wasn't built overnight. Its philosophical roots go way back, centuries even. You had thinkers like Francis Bacon declaring that humans were meant to be the masters of nature, to lead and drive it. That idea fueled this whole culture of, you could call it triumphant taking. And then, boom, the Industrial Revolution came along, harnessed fossil fuels, and basically put the whole thing on steroids, scaling up extraction to a global level. Okay, so to figure out why this machine keeps chugging along, we have to look at its internal logic. It really all boils down to the incentives, the things that keep its gears turning. And this is the big question, isn't it? I mean, if we can see the leaks so clearly, the bleached reefs, the stronger storms, the polluted communities, why don't we just shut the machine down? It seems so obvious. Well, this slide really lays out the fundamental conflict. Look at the left side. What climate action needs is long-term planning, collective sacrifice, thinking about the public good. But the machine? Its programming is the total opposite. It prioritizes short-term profit, individual gain, and corporate growth. So if you're operating from inside the machine's logic, delaying action actually makes perfect sense. The profits are here and now, and the costs, well, those can be dealt with later. And this all led to what Naomi Klein calls an epic case of historical bad timing. Think about it. In the 1980s, just when the science on climate change was becoming undeniable, the whole ideology of deregulation and the free market was at its absolute peak. So you had this urgent call for collective action that just crashed head-on into a system built to prioritize corporate freedom above pretty much everything else. So what happens when you just let this machine run unchecked? We can actually map the fallout, the real-world outcomes of its leaks. And what's crucial to understand is that these aren't random accidents. Nope, they are the predictable, even inevitable results of how the system is designed. For one thing, the machine's leaks don't spread out evenly. They tend to pool in what are called sacrifice zones. These are regions and communities, often poor or minority, that are essentially written off as less valuable and are forced to carry the poisonous burden of all this pollution. A really clear example is in Appalachia, where entire mountaintops are just blown apart for coal, and the local communities are left to deal with the devastating aftermath. And second, This machine is shockingly good at turning a crisis into a business opportunity. Klein has a name for this: disaster capitalism. Take what happened after Hurricane Katrina. While people were just struggling to survive, pro-corporate policies were rushed through. Public schools in New Orleans got replaced by charter schools. Environmental regulations were rolled back. The disaster itself became the perfect cover to double down on the system's logic. And here's the crucial point. When you start to map out where these sacrifice zones are located, and you look at who gets hit the hardest by disaster capitalism, a very clear pattern emerges. This unequal burden, which falls disproportionately on communities of color, has a name: environmental racism. It's not an accident. It's a direct outcome of the machine's leaky design. You look at all this injustice, and it raises a pretty big question. How does the system keep going? I mean, despite all the obvious damage it's causing, the machine just keeps running. So let's dig into the forces that actually lock it in place. And this right here is the core idea of this whole explainer. The system persists because of what we're calling a crisis in perception. We've been taught to see climate change as an isolated environmental issue, right? A problem of too much carbon in the atmosphere. But that's mistaking the symptom for the cause. The real problem is the economic machine that is literally programmed to pump out that carbon as a natural byproduct of its relentless drive for profit. This crisis in perception is held in place by three really powerful forces. First, you've got corporate power. For decades, fossil fuel companies actively funded campaigns to spread denial and doubt. Second, our political systems are often hooked on a model of economic growth that demands constant extraction. And third, this free market ideology has been used to systematically tear down the regulations that were designed to protect the public, which makes holding anyone accountable for the machine's leaks, well, almost impossible. And a major tactic for managing how we see all this is something called greenwashing. This picture is a classic example. You have an oil company painting one of its storage tanks for Earth Day. It creates this nice, superficial image of being environmentally friendly. But all the while, their core business, extracting and selling fossil fuels, just continues, business as usual. It's a really clever way to make people feel better without having to change a single thing about how the destructive machine actually works. Okay, so to really get the full picture of this leaking machine, we need to zoom out a bit. We need to see how it's plugged into a much, much larger global network, a network that both powers it and protects it. This extractive economy doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's deeply connected to global supply chains, to international finance, to powerful political and lobbying systems, and to the media narratives and advertising that constantly reinforce the idea that, hey, this is just the only way to do things. Understanding this bigger network is absolutely key to seeing why making real change is so incredibly difficult. But here's the thing about having a map. It doesn't just show you the obstacles, it also reveals new possibilities. By seeing the whole system, its history, its incentives, its outcomes, all the things that hold it in place, we can finally move beyond just trying to patch up the symptoms. So, the crucial question this analysis leaves us with is this. Now that we have a clearer map of the machine, where are the best places to start taking it apart? Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly. This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a longer audio-based analysis of this topic, see the deep dive linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.